On this Wednesday night, poisoned, the powerful nerve agent used to try to silence a Russian opposition leader. New evidence of a sinister plot.
A lethal dose is less than a grain of salt.
The push to hold the Kremlin accountable. Sick kids and sick days. New rules during the pandemic. Sounding the alarm about Canada's at-risk species. What's needed to reverse a troubling trend. Plus, a war that changed the world and Canada.
We began to step out onto the world stage.
The Second World War's lasting legacy, 75 years after it ended.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The mystery about what made a Russian opposition leader critically ill has been solved. German authorities say they found evidence Alexei Navalny, a vocal critic of Russian President Vladimir Putin, was poisoned by the nerve agent Novichok. That's the same military-grade nerve agent used in an attack on a former Russian spy, Sergei Skripal, and his daughter in England 2 years ago. Navalny fell ill during a flight in Siberia last month. He was eventually airlifted to Berlin, where he remains in intensive care. His team says he was poisoned on the orders of President Putin. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel says the world will now look to Russia for answers. But as Redmond Shannon reports, Putin is highly skilled at avoiding them.
An announcement that has again pitted the West against Russia in a battle for the truth.
Chemischen Nervenkampfstoff der Novichok-Gruppe.
Novichok, says German Chancellor Angela Merkel, unequivocally identified as the chemical used to poison Russian opposition politician Alexei Navalny. It's the same Russian-developed substance that the UK said was used to poison double agent Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia in England in 2018. They survived, but a British woman exposed to the chemical died.
Novichok is one of the more potent elements of a series that are called organophosphate nerve agents. A lethal dose, just so people can put it into perspective, is less than a grain of salt's worth.
In Berlin, Navalny remains in an induced coma. 2 weeks ago, he collapsed in agony on a plane from Siberia to Moscow. Russian hospital staff and the Kremlin maintain there's no evidence of poisoning, but Navalny's supporters insist he was targeted by President Vladimir Putin. In this video, believed to be filmed shortly before the incident, Navalny again encouraged Russians to vote tactically against Putin's United Russia Party. In the wake of the Skripal attack, Western nations expelled Russian diplomats and imposed new sanctions. But there has been little sign that Putin cares about those, or cares that Novichok is effectively a brazen calling card of the Kremlin.
This is another message out to Navalny or any other opposition personnel that are out there to say, look, we can get you anywhere at any time.
Germany and others have hinted at new sanctions, and the EU has demanded a transparent investigation by Russia. That seems hopeful at best. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
There are reports the U.S. Department of Homeland Security withheld an intelligence bulletin warning of a Russian plot to spread misinformation about the mental health of presidential candidates, including Joe Biden, the Democratic presidential candidate. ABC News is reporting the bulletin claims Russians were working on plans to spread allegations American presidential candidates have poor mental or physical health in order to influence the 2020 election. The Department of Homeland Security says the bulletin failed to meet agency standards and was not sent out. In this country, political insiders are planning for a potential federal election this fall. In case you forgot, the last one was just last year. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau lost his majority, and now there's a new man leading the Conservative Party who wants to make his mark. You might ask why anyone would even be thinking about another federal election so soon, especially in the midst of a pandemic. Well, our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stephenson is here to fill us in. Mercedes, what's up, and how serious are the plans for a fall federal election?
Well, Donna, it feels like it was just yesterday, at least here in Ottawa, that we just had an election. It was 1 year and 1 week ago that it was called, but already the national capital is buzzing about it happening again. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was on a virtual tour of British Columbia today. And while it's totally normal for a prime minister to touch base in different parts of the country, the rhetoric by the Liberals recently has more of a campaign feel. Take a listen to what the prime minister told Global BC this afternoon about his plans for the fall.
That's why we're putting together a throne speech now that will set out this ambitious agenda before Parliament, and parliamentarians can decide, because we're in a minority situation, whether this government has the support to move forward on this new agenda that, quite frankly, nobody ran an election on a year ago because we didn't know about COVID.
So, Donna, right there you have the Prime Minister really putting the ball in the opposition's court, saying that they're going to put it to these parties to decide. But there's a big political calculus that everyone has to be thinking about, and it's not just what's in that throne speech. It's, do Canadians actually want an election? Or is there a risk that they will punish the party who pulls the plug in the middle of a pandemic? It's something that all of the parties are watching very closely and they're conducting polls on. But I can tell you that sources in the Liberals, Conservatives, and NDP say that they are already planning campaign logistics and will be ready to go if there is a snap election this fall. For the Liberals, the advantage of an election now is a mandate to spend significant amounts of money on social programs in that throne speech. And you heard the Prime Minister making reference to that. There's also a chance to plunge onto the hustings before the Conservative leader has a chance to really establish his brand, and frankly, a chance for the Liberals to eat the NDP's lunch when it comes to policy. The desire to get ahead of a potential looming recession could be another factor. Most political insiders think that a spring election is more likely at this point, but Donna, sometimes speculation like this generates its own kind of pressure.
All right, Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa, thanks. Erin O'Toole played down talk about an election this fall. The new Conservative leader is still building his team. He made some key appointments today, just 3 weeks before Parliament reconvenes, as our chief political correspondent, David Akin, explains.
Next Prime Minister.
Erin O'Toole is the first leader of the modern Conservative Party not from Western Canada. He's from Ontario. His chief of staff, national campaign director, and other top aides are also from Eastern Canada. But O'Toole will have a strong voice from the West in his inner sanctum in his newly named deputy leader, Candice Bergen.
Someone respected across the country, former cabinet minister, someone who's been a passionate defender of our Conservative party in the past, and will help us mentor and grow our movement of the future.
Bergen has represented her southern Manitoba riding since 2008, and both she and O'Toole recognize that Western Canada's concerns must be at the heart of Conservative policies.
One of the things that he's asked me to focus on is Western alienation, and the fact that Westerners need to know that Conservatives know that this is an issue and that they will not be ignored.
O'Toole's pick for the important position of House Leader is Gérard Deltel of Quebec City. The bilingual Deltel is a strong parliamentary performer respected by all sides. O'Toole also continued to signal how important it will be for his party to broaden its base.
I've said repeatedly, we need to reach out and grow our movement with more women, more new Canadians, and let themselves see themselves reflected in our Conservative movement.
But there are clear differences in the way men and women are lining up politically right now. A new poll from the Angus Reid Institute shows that men prefer the Conservatives by a wide 12-point margin, 42% versus 30% for the Liberals. But women prefer the Liberals by an almost as wide 11-point margin, 40% to 29% for the Tories. This is a gender gap both parties will likely have to address. Canadians may start to get a sense of how O'Toole plans to do that when he names his shadow cabinet next week and then starts to flesh out his party's platform. Donna.
All right, David Akin, thank you. There's another health crisis still going on in Canada, one that's been eclipsed by all the attention to COVID-19. But in parts of this country, people are dying of opioid overdoses in record numbers. Opioid-related deaths have significantly increased during the COVID-19 pandemic. In BC, there were a record number of deaths in May, June, and July. More than 170 people died from overdoses in each of those months. Canada's Health Minister Patty Hajdu tweeted today it's more important than ever that support is available for people struggling with addiction. There are widespread calls, including from some premiers and public health officers, to decriminalize the possession of small amounts of illicit drugs for personal use. In his interview with Global News today, the Prime Minister wouldn't commit to changing the law, but says fewer people are being prosecuted for personal possession.
The Public Prosecution Service of Canada has moved forward with new orders that doesn't involve prosecuting for small amounts of personal possession. I think this is an ongoing conversation, but there is no one silver bullet that's going to fix this tremendous challenge.
The Prime Minister said any response has to address issues like housing and mental health as well. He added his government has moved forward with opening more safe consumption sites and taken steps to increase a safer supply of illicit drugs. There's a promising new development tonight about a treatment for people who are seriously ill with COVID-19. Researchers say they have strong evidence some cheap, widely available steroids can help. In one of several studies published today in the Journal of American Medical Association, researchers analyzed data from 7 randomized clinical trials. They found steroids like dexamethasone, which helps the body battle inflammation, reduce the risk of death of critically ill COVID-19 patients by about 1/3. The World Health Organization is now strongly recommending the steroids be used to treat severely ill patients, but not to treat mild cases. A global campaign to provide every country in the world safe and equitable access to a vaccine for COVID-19, if one is discovered, appears to be faltering. The U.S. says it is refusing to be part of the World Health Organization's COVAX initiative. The White House has accused the WHO of being corrupt and too political.
There is no nation that has been or will be as deeply committed to delivering vaccines all around the world. But it is also imperative that when we do that, we need to do so in a way that's effective. It's not political, that is science-based. And what we have seen demonstrate from the World Health Organization that it is not that.
The WHO has warned against vaccine nationalism, and as everyone waits for the vaccine trials to finish, life is moving on. Here in Canada, parents, teachers, and schools are embarking on a big experiment by sending kids back to school. Precautions vary depending on where you live. There are rules about masks and personal hygiene, and new policies about what happens when students get sick. As Jeff Semple reports, gone are the days of going off to school with the sniffles.
Good job.
Julia Silvestri Wong is a mother to 3 kids, all under the age of 7, which basically means they're constantly sick.
My youngest is going to preschool and they're going to public school. We're basically sick from October to March.
But this year, taking a sick day won't be so simple. New policies to prevent COVID-19 from spreading in schools mean minor symptoms could become major headaches.
It's scary because you don't want to downplay a symptom if your kid's got a runny nose, but also what if you have to send them to school, or what do you do with them?
The rules range by province and school board, but most require a student to stay home if they have even one of a long list of possible COVID-19 symptoms. Students in British Columbia are asked to consult their doctor and wait till they're feeling better before returning to class. In Alberta, students are legally required to stay home for 10 days or until they're feeling better. Ontario's rules are even stricter. Students must stay home for 14 days unless they have a negative test, in which case they can return 24 hours after feeling better.
There have been several studies that have shown that the test is not reliable.
This pediatrician worries about relying on COVID-19 tests, with evidence suggesting they can sometimes produce false negatives, especially in children.
So any kid with any new symptoms should be considered as having COVID and really should stay at home.
But that could quickly add up to weeks of missed school. Younger students in particular typically catch one viral infection every month.
And so it's very conceivable that, especially as we get into cold and flu season, that a child could have symptoms very typical for COVID-19 but have something else. And so that's one of the reasons why we think it's going to be a bit of a confusing, stressful fall.
Health experts stress the importance of receiving the flu shot and practicing proper hygiene to help ensure children don't catch COVID-19 or anything else. Jeff Semple, Global News, Toronto.
Going the distance for a good cause. Coming up, a military veteran steps into a new mission against COVID-19. Security was high at a Paris courthouse today for the start of the Charlie Hebdo terror trial. 14 people are accused of being accomplices in the attack on the satirical newspaper's offices in 2015 and a shooting spree at a kosher supermarket 2 days later. 3 gunmen were killed in police raids, and the attacks left 17 people dead, including several cartoonists at Charlie Hebdo. The publication was targeted after it published caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad, something considered offensive in Islam. The newspaper republished those images in this week's edition. Pope Francis held his first public audience in 6 months today, and he declared Friday as a day of prayer and fasting for Lebanon.
Buongiorno.
Nearly 500 Catholics gathered in a Vatican courtyard instead of St. Peter's Square. Everyone wore masks. A Lebanese priest held his country's flag as the Pope called for peace and dialogue in Lebanon. Plunging population still ahead. A troubling report on at-risk species in Canada. Canada may be a nature lover's paradise, but new research shows some of our wildlife is in serious decline. Natural habitats are increasingly under threat. That's having a major impact on survival. According to the World Wildlife Federation, between 1970 and 2016, populations of species assessed as at risk have fallen an average of 59%, and species deemed globally at risk have plunged by an average of 42% in Canada. Robin Gill looks at the decline of these vulnerable species and what's being done to stop it.
In British Columbia's interior, volunteers at this bird sanctuary have been working diligently to build underground homes for the burrowing owl. In the 1990s, this migratory bird population, which likes to tunnel, dropped by 90%. Considered endangered, there are only roughly 270 left.
The largest issue still eludes us, and that is having enough owls returning into British Columbia such that they can sustain their population over time without our interference.
A new report from the World Wildlife Fund highlights the plight of at-risk animals, their numbers dwindling in Canada.
I think there's a growing urgency knowing that we are seeing these continued downward trends.
There are other animals at risk. Barren ground caribou, also known as reindeer, have seen some herds decline by as much as 98% because natural resource companies are moving in and destroying their habitats. North Atlantic right whales are critically endangered. Only 411 exist in the world, largely because they keep getting killed by ships or fishing gear.
Things are not going in the right direction, and not only are species declining, but how we are addressing the nature of the economy that gives rise to all of these stressors that we know are problems.
For now, projects like the Burrowing Owl Conservation Society have to exist to monitor their existence. The vicious circle that humans have to interfere in protecting a problem we created. Robin Gill, Global News, Vancouver.
Next, looking back at the Second World War and how it shaped the present day. 99-year-old George Marco has a lot to celebrate tonight. The Second World War veteran just finished his final lap of a 100-kilometer mission. Marco has been doing laps around his Ontario seniors residence since April. It's his way of raising money to fight COVID-19. But he's still a little short of his goal to raise $100,000, so he plans to keep doing laps until he reaches his target. He is one of tens of millions of people who took part in the Second World War. The global conflict lasted 6 years, and it was the most destructive and deadliest in history. That war impacted virtually every part of the world, including Canada. It formally ended 75 years ago today, though as Eric Sorensen explains, it sparked changes that remain to this day.
From the rise of Hitler to the attack on Pearl Harbor, it was war that spanned the globe. It saw cities and civilians firebombed. It produced genocide. It introduced nuclear annihilation. More than 70 million people were killed, about 4% of the entire world. Canada was deeply affected. Close to 100,000 were killed or wounded, more than 1 million served in the forces, and countless more helped the war effort on farms, in factories, and in fundraising.
Canada fought around the world. We fought in the Far East. We fought in Hong Kong. We fought in Sicily and Italy.
In his book, The Fight for History, Tim Cook says Canada's role has not been adequately chronicled.
Over the years, we forgot about our contribution, our service, and our sacrifice. We didn't do a good job in telling our stories.
The formal end of the war, the signing of surrender documents by Japan 75 years ago, set off enormous and enduring change worldwide, for better or worse. The creation of the United Nations, it was hoped, would bring countries together to resolve differences. But new boundaries sparked the Cold War and ongoing conflicts ever since.
This titanic conflict that forever changed the world that we live in, that saw the rise of superpowers, saw the Cold War, saw the decolonization of many empires. That war is still with us today.
Canada emerged from the war with stronger ties to the economy and the military of the United States. But we also forged a Canadian path forward in peacekeeping and as an influential power in international trade and diplomacy. And at home, emphasis on social inclusion, from pensions for returning veterans to strengthening public education and ultimately universal health insurance.
The war stimulated government intervention into the lives of Canadians. There was the baby bonus. There was increased urbanization. There was industrialization. We began to step out onto the world stage, that we saw ourselves as part of the world community and a force for good, of which we were.
Canada's population today is triple what it was in 1945, spurred by immigration, a country that has come of age, striving to be a prosperous and multicultural model to the world. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Buck Lake in Alberta, southwest of Edmonton. We'd love to see your Canada. Please email it to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. It's good to be back. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.